Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Scott Schell and I'm a specialist in the Germanic languages. I have a BA in German, an MA in linguistics, and a PhD in Germanic linguistics from UC Berkeley. And welcome to the very first episode on American runic inscriptions. So this is a sub-series of this channel basically where I go out to various places in the United States and examine particular runic inscriptions, mostly runestones. And what I'm trying to do is get as much social context as I can, maybe contact the carver, give you a translation, and maybe speculate on a particular purpose if, of course, the original carver is no longer available to speak with me. So far I have access to a catalog which has about 100 different American runic inscriptions. For each one of these inscriptions, of course, there was a different intent. But almost never was the intent to actually prove that the Vikings were here. That's actually more of an agenda from various groups that want to prove that Vikings were here. And as you'll see when we examine these inscriptions, there's nothing about Vikings on these particular runic inscriptions. However, they are very interesting, and as you'll see in this video, there was even a runestone that was given to Arthur Middleton Reeves by the Icelanders because he was such an amazing Germanic philologist. I do hope that you enjoy this series, and let me know what you think in the comments below about how you view this particular video here with Arthur Middleton Reeves and the Cincinnati runestone. Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Scott Schell and welcome to the very first video on the American Runestone project. I'm here with my friend and colleague Lindsay Preseau. She's going to go ahead and talk about the context of the runestone and Arthur Middleton Reeves a little bit, and then I will go ahead and give you all the translation and talk about the language that's used. So, Lindsay?
Thanks. So I'm Dr. Lindsay Preseau. I'm an assistant professor of German at Iowa State University. I was previously here at University of Cincinnati as well as assistant professor educator. And that's where I actually stumbled upon this stone. It was the middle of the pandemic. I had a toddler. I had nothing to do, walking through this graveyard, and suddenly I came upon this. Like Scott said, we went to grad school together at UC Berkeley, and I started out doing some historical Germanic linguistics, but then I've kind of moved into contemporary stuff. So I knew enough to know, you know, this is interesting, but I didn't know enough to know, for example, what I was looking at in terms of the style of the runes and things like that. So that's
you knew they were runes.
Right? Scott. I knew they were runes, and I knew they were not, you know, completely crappy runes.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
So as far as Arthur coming over, we know that there were two stones, right? Well, at least there might have been two stones. Yeah. But it's been like a mystery here as far as like where these stones came from. I just also found a news source, by the way, from a librarian over in the Morrisson-Reeves Library, and she said that these stones may have even come from Ireland.
Oh my.
So that's another factor. But they, or I should say the one most likely came from Iceland, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, based on what you've looked at and what I've looked at. Just real quick too, I did go to Reeveston right before here to check on that second stone, and it's not there. It doesn't exist. I had like the same librarian actually help me out, and we walked the estate, the entrance to the estate and Arthur's home, but we couldn't find anything.
Right. I mean, we thought there might be something there based on a LiveJournal post, which was something, you know, that some renowned scholars of runic inscriptions pointed us towards. So there's really not a lot out there.
Right. So do you want to give us a little bit of background to Arthur and, you know, what he was and how he was important to Cincinnati and whatnot? Or?
Sure, yeah. So Arthur Middleton Reeves, he was a Germanic philologist. Very unsurprising that this was his choice of burial. And what he was known for was his work on the Icelandic discovery, singular maybe, of America.
Yeah.
He died very young. He died in his early 30s, which makes this also an interesting burial in a train accident. He was actually at the time managing his late father's estate, Reeveston, where Scott was today, in Indiana. But this is his family burial plot. His family had their roots kind of in Cincinnati, and so it's very interesting. You've got next to us here. Scott will probably show you. It's some very, very boring graves of his parents, and then his kind of elaborate runestone. So his work with the discovery of Iceland, I think, is probably what makes the stone most interesting.
Yeah.
Because he politically kind of distanced himself from certain research that was done around that.
Yeah, weren't there a lot of people also trying to tie the Vikings to certain stones too at that time, and he was sort of saying no, there's no proof of that, or at least he was sort of going against that culture.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first person to publish on the discovery was Carl Christian Raffin, and he said that the Icelanders had come to the United States, the political United States geographically, and that seems to be specious and based on a misinterpretation. He looked at these indigenous petroglyphs and decided that they were runic, which is extremely problematic. And Reeves was someone who said no. That's bullshit. That's not what happened. Yep. Yes, the Icelanders probably were in the Americas, but they were much farther north.
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, since he was a Germanic philologist, he was, very much involved with studies concerning the Eddas, right? The Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. And as some of you may know, the Poetic Edda, of course, was a collection of poems written in the Old Norse language and dated to 1270, I think, is when they were actually compiled. That's how we date that Codex Regius is what it's called. But there's a famous stanza in that particular poem, and stanza 76, in that collection of works, stanza 76 in a poem called Havamal, and in which case is, in Old Norse, it's Deir fe, Deir frender, Deir sjálfri sama. En orðstyr, Deir aldrei, kvema sér góðan getur. And what that means is cattle die, your friends die, you yourself will die in the same way, but one thing that never dies is a word glory or a reputation of the one who earns a good one. So that is quite fitting for this particular runestone right here. One of the other reasons we think that it came from Iceland is because that was actually an Icelandic tradition in later obituaries, to where if an Icelander had passed away, you would find that stanza 76 from Havamal, in someone's obituary. So it was still a long, standing tradition in Icelandic culture to assign that stanza to the one who had died. The other thing is that this stanza ends with a swastika. Now, of course, this is not tied to NSDAP Nazi ideology whatsoever, because obviously it predates World War II. But if you look at the scholarship at the time and what they thought this particular swastika meant, it actually meant to them at that particular time the hammer of Thor. And so you can also see in various other runic inscriptions in Scandinavia where it's Thor who blesses the runes, or Thor who blesses the monument, or Thor who blesses the stone. And it literally says, may Thor bless this object. And then we also see in various Icelandic sources too, where Thor's hammer is used to bless things. So when you look at it in that context, it makes sense that when this swastika was executed at this particular time, that was probably the intention behind the carver. They meant to say something like, may Thor bless this stone. I don't think the serpent really has any sort of Scandinavian style to it. I mean, they were sort of mimicking Swedish style, but even Henrik, a friend of ours, he said that it was kind of cute in the way that they executed it. So the futhark that's actually used, that's the alphabet, is a mixture of the younger system, which is the younger futhark, which is like the Viking runes, and the medieval extensions. And so it's a mixture of those two systems.
I think something else that's strange about this stone is that it's lying flat, and that's something we kind of had to puzzle out what's going on here. You can see someone has inscribed these Roman numerals here, and it looks probably not to have been done at the same time or with the same intent, so we'd expect this to be underground.
Yeah,
right?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and of course that's traditionally how those stones were found.
Right.
You never really found them laying down like those.
No, yeah.
So-
It probably has to do with the fact that this Spring Grove Cemetery is kind of a very important historical cemetery in the United States, and it was founded on this model of cemetery building that discouraged high monuments except under certain kind of constraints. If you look up Spring Grove right now, you'll see that that there's a SpongeBob grave, for example, that was a very controversial. So probably similarly, they were told you're going to have to lie this on its side,
Right.
and that was probably not how it was intended to be. Hence
No.
the portion for putting under.
Yeah.
And then this probably would have been on the back, right? Or you would have probably used both sides.
Yeah, I mean, you do find some. You definitely do find some runestones like that. I mean, if they were trying to be historically accurate. Bjorkatorp is one, where you have a formula on one side and then another formula on the other side. So yeah, no, that's fair to say that it would have been on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
so I think like what's really
sorry.
interesting is that if someone who doesn't know anything about this or knows a little bit about runestones looks at it, sees the swastika, they're going to think, oh, this is some weird problematic thing. But I think actually it's quite the opposite. Like
Yeah.
Arthur Middleton Reeves was someone who was a scholar and a scientist of philology, and he really fought against these ideas that based on indigenous petroglyphs that the Icelanders had been in the south, and the fact that he placed this here, and that it's clearly something that was created in the late 19th century
Yep.
in Iceland, and is just kind of this piece of art representing his we can't say exactly, but beliefs or value
Sure,
systems
yeah.
is interesting.
I mean, at the very least, it clearly shows that he was a very dedicated scholar, and Iceland acknowledged that too by presenting him this stone. All right, well, thanks. That's all we pretty much wanted to say about the Cincinnati runestone concerning Arthur Middleton Reeves. Again, this is the beginning of a very big project called the American Runestone Project, and I have about 100 different inscriptions that I have access to, and I'm going to go ahead and try to do a video for every American runic inscription that I do encounter. I already have some in the works. There are 2 that are going to be recorded in Chicago. One that is actually a shield that was given to the United States from Sweden, dated to 1895. I got another one that's dated to actually 2014. And there's another one up in Syracuse, New York, which has a sort of magical protection spell, kind of interesting. And then another one over in New Jersey, which again quotes Havamal. So thank you again for watching. Please go ahead and like the video and subscribe, share it with whomever you might think will find this interesting, and I will see you all soon. Take care.